You walk the same route every morning, the same concrete beneath your feet, the same turn at the corner where the coffee shop hums with espresso machines and hushed voices, the same crosswalk where you wait, watching strangers scroll through their phones, their faces lit by blue light even in daylight. You walk this route because it's convenient, because it gets you where you need to go, because the algorithm in your pocket suggested it once and you never thought to question it. But sometimes, in the space between footsteps, you feel it. A strange heaviness. Not quite sadness, not quite longing. Just the sense that something about this walking feels temporary, like you're passing through rather than belonging to the ground beneath you. The path doesn't know you. It won't remember you were here. And you won't remember it either. Not really, because tomorrow there might be construction, a detour, a better route that saves you 3 minutes. The path is interchangeable. So are you. You weren't always this light, this untethered. There was a time when walking meant something different, not in your life perhaps, but in the lives that made your life possible, in the feet that came before yours. Your great-grandmother walked the same path to the well every morning for 60 years. The same stones, the same roots breaking through the earth, the same bend in the road where the valley opened up and you could see the neighbouring farms stitched into the hillside like a quilt someone's hands had been working on for centuries. She didn't choose that path because it was optimal. She walked it because her mother had walked it, and her mother before that, and because the earth there had been pressed down by so many footsteps that it had become something more than dirt. It had become a relationship, a conversation between the living and the dead, between memory and motion, between the body and the ground that would one day receive it. You think about this sometimes, when the restlessness gets loud, when you're lying awake at 3 in the morning, scrolling through images of places you'll never visit, lives you'll never live, paths you'll never walk. You think about what it would feel like to walk the same route your grandmother walked, to know that your feet are falling where hers once fell, to feel the weight of that continuity, that inheritance, that strange comfort in repetition. Not the repetition of routine, which feels like a cage, but the repetition of ritual, which feels like home. But you don't have that path. You don't even know where it was. Maybe it's paved over now, a parking lot or a highway or a strip mall where teenagers work part-time jobs that feel like nowhere, like waiting. Maybe the well is gone. Maybe the stones have been dug up and repurposed, and the only thing left is a photograph in someone's attic, fading, the faces unrecognizable even to the people whose blood still carries their shape. You live in a world of infinite paths, and no path at all. Every route is possible. Every route is temporary. You can live anywhere, work anywhere, walk anywhere, and so you belong nowhere. The ground beneath your feet is always new, always unfamiliar, always indifferent to whether you're there or not. And you feel it in your body, this untethering, this sense that you're floating, even when you're standing still, and even when you're moving forward, even when you're doing everything right. The restlessness isn't laziness. It isn't ingratitude. It's your body remembering something your mind has forgotten. That once, not so long ago, your people walked the same paths for generations. That the earth knew them. That they knew the earth. That walking wasn't just movement, but a form of return, a way of saying, I am still here. We are still here. This place is ours because we have given ourselves to it, season after season, step after step, until the boundary between self and landscape dissolved into something that felt like time itself. You weren't designed for placelessness. Your bones remember the footpaths. Your nervous system remembers the rhythm of walking the same route until it becomes unconscious, until your feet know the way, even in the dark. It was until the path becomes a kind of meditation, a way of being in the world that doesn't require thought or choice or optimization. Just presence, just return, just the quiet knowledge that this ground has held you before and will hold you again. But that world is gone, or so you've been told. You're supposed to be grateful for the freedom, the mobility, the endless options. You're supposed to feel liberated by the fact that you're not bound to any one place, any one path, any one way of being. And you are grateful, in a way. You know the old world had its cruelties, its limitations, its suffocating smallness. You know that leaving was necessary for some, that movement was survival for others, that the old paths were not always kind to the people who walked them. But still, the restlessness. What, the sense that something has been lost that you don't have the language to name? The feeling that you are always arriving and never arrived, always in transit and never at rest, always searching for a place that feels like it was waiting for you, like it knows your name, like it remembers the shape of your feet. You try to fill the emptiness with motion. More travel, more experiences, more novelty. You collect cities like postcards, restaurants like achievements, views like evidence that you are living, that you are free, that you are making the most of this one precious life. And it works for a moment. The dopamine hit of somewhere new, someone new, something new. But then the restlessness returns, quieter now, more insidious, like a low hum beneath the noise of your life. And you realize that all this movement isn't taking you anywhere. It's just keeping you from feeling the fact that you don't know where you belong. So you stop, or you try to stop. You tell yourself you'll stay in one place, build a life, put down roots. You rent an apartment, buy furniture, learn the names of the streets, find a favorite coffee shop where the barista starts to recognize you. You walk the same route to work every day, hoping that repetition will create the thing you're missing, that if you just stay long enough, the ground will start to feel like yours. But it doesn't, not really, because you know, in the back of your mind, that this is temporary too. The lease will end, the job will change, the city will stop feeling right, or you will stop feeling right in it, and you'll move again, start again. I've walked new paths that will never become old enough to mean anything. You are free to go anywhere, and so you are bound to nowhere. The weight of choice has replaced the weight of belonging, and you're not sure which is heavier. You wonder if your ancestors felt this, if they ever stood on their inherited paths and felt the suffocation of sameness, the longing for elsewhere, the curiosity about what lay beyond the hills they'd been born into. You wonder if they dreamed of leaving, if they resented the paths they walked, if they felt trapped by the very continuity you now mourn. Probably some of them did. Probably some of them left, and their leaving is why you're here, why you walk different paths, why you carry this restlessness like a birthright. But you also know that most of them stayed, not because they were too afraid to leave or too ignorant to imagine another way, but because the path was theirs, because walking it meant something more than getting from one place to another. It meant participating in a story that was older than them and would outlast them. It meant being part of a conversation between the living and the dead, between the soil and the seed, between memory and the slow, patient work of becoming. You don't have that story anymore. You have freedom instead. And freedom is good. Freedom is necessary. Freedom is what your ancestors might have wanted for you if they could have imagined a world where leaving didn't mean exile and moving didn't mean loss. But freedom is also lonely. It's weightless. It's the feeling of walking on ground that doesn't remember you, that won't hold you. That lets you pass through without leaving a trace. And so you lie awake, restless, scrolling through images of places you'll never belong to, mourning paths you've never walked, longing for a kind of home that might never have existed the way you imagine it, not because the past was better, but because the past gave people a place in the world. And you, with all your freedom, with all your options, with all your maps and apps and infinite routes, are still trying to find yours. The restlessness isn't a problem to solve. It's a message. Your body telling you something your culture has tried to make you forget. That you were made for belonging, not just movement. That your feet were designed to walk the same ground until it becomes sacred, until it becomes memory. and until it becomes the thing you return to in your dreams when the world feels too big and too empty and too loud. You can't go back. The old paths are gone or changed or belong to someone else now. But you can listen to what the longing is telling you. That somewhere, beneath the restlessness, beneath the endless scroll and the infinite options, and the optimization of every route, there is still a human animal who wants to walk the same ground their people walked, who wants to feel the weight of continuity, who wants to belong to a place the way a tree belongs to the soil, the way a river belongs to its banks, the way a footpath belongs to the feet that made it. You weren't designed for placelessness, and the ache you feel when you think about inherited landscapes, about paths worn smooth by generations of the same feet, and about the quiet knowledge that this ground has held your people before, and will hold them again. That ache isn't nostalgia for a past you never lived. It's your body remembering what it needs, what it has always needed, what it will always need, no matter how far you travel or how many new paths you walk. It's the need to be held by the earth, to be remembered by the ground, to walk a path that knows your name because it knew the names of the people who made you, whose feet shaped the route, whose presence turned dirt into destination, into meaning, into home. And maybe that's why you can't sleep, why you scroll and search and imagine other lives in other places on other paths, because you're looking for something that can't be found by moving, only by staying, only by walking the same ground long enough that it starts to walk you back, and only by becoming the ancestor someone else will one day long for, standing where you stood, feeling what you felt, trying to understand why the path still remembers. The path remembers because feet are patient, because return is a kind of prayer, because time, when you walk it slowly enough, stops being distance and starts being home. Imagine her, your great-grandmother, rising before dawn, not because she set an alarm or had an important meeting or needed to optimize her morning routine, but because the cows were waiting, because the chickens needed feeding, because the day's work began when the light did, and there was no negotiating with the light. She rises in the dark, the floorboards cold beneath her feet, the house still holding the silence of sleep. She doesn't turn on a light. She doesn't need one. Her feet know the way. She pulls on the same dress she wore yesterday, will wear tomorrow. Not because she has no others, but because this one is right for the work. Worn soft in the places where her body bends, patched at the knee where she kneels in the garden, sturdy enough to last another season if she's careful. She wraps a shawl around her shoulders, ties it the way her mother taught her, the way her daughter will one day teach her own daughter, though neither of them knows this yet. The gesture is unconscious, inherited, a kind of muscle memory that transcends the individual body and becomes something collective, something passed down like the color of eyes or the shape of hands. She steps outside. The air is cold, sharp, the kind of cold that wakes you all the way up, that makes you grateful for the warmth you'll return to. And the sky is beginning to pale at the edges, that deep blue-black that comes just before dawn, when the world is suspended between night and day, between dreaming and waking. She can see her breath. She can hear the distant sound of a rooster, someone else's farm coming awake. The same rhythm everywhere, the same ancient choreography of human and animal and land. And she begins to walk. The path is there, waiting. Not paved, not marked, just a line of earth worn smooth by footsteps, by the passage of bodies moving in the same direction for reasons that have become inseparable from the landscape itself. The well is east. It has always been east. Her feet know this the way your lungs know to breathe, the way your heart knows to beat. She doesn't think about the route. She doesn't wonder if there's a better way. The path is the way. The only way. The right way. Her feet fall into the rhythm automatically. Left, right, left, right. The same rhythm her mother walked. The same rhythm her grandmother walked. The path holds the memory of all those feet, all those mornings, all those women carrying water, back to houses where children slept and fires needed tending, and the day's work spread out like a known country, every task in its place, every hour accounted for. She walks past the old oak tree, the one that was here before her great-grandfather built the house, the one that will be here long after the house returns to the earth. She doesn't look at it, not consciously, but she feels it, the way you feel the presence of someone you've known your whole life. It marks the halfway point. From here, she can see the neighbouring farm across the valley, me smoke just beginning to rise from their chimney. She wonders if Anna is up yet, if her baby slept through the night, if the cough that had been worrying her last week has gotten better or worse. She'll find out at church on Sunday. She always does. The path dips down, following the contour of the land, and her body adjusts without thought, her weight shifting, her knees bending, her feet finding purchase on the stones that generations of feet have made smooth. In spring, this part of the path turns to mud, thick and sucking, and she has to wear her heavy boots and step carefully. In summer, the dust rises in small clouds around her ankles, coating her hem, making her cough. In winter, the snow covers the path completely, but she still knows where it is. Her feet find it beneath the white, following the muscle memory of 1,000 previous walks. This is not romantic. She doesn't think, how beautiful this is, this connection to the land, this ritual of walking the same path my ancestors walked. She thinks, the bucket is heavy, my back aches. I hope the well hasn't frozen. She thinks about the work waiting for her at home, the bread that needs baking, the mending that needs doing, the 100 small tasks that fill a day until there's no space left for anything else. She thinks about her youngest son, who has a fever, about the cow that's due to calve any day now, about the fact that her husband barely spoke at dinner last night, and she doesn't know if he's angry or tired or worried about something he won't say. This is her life, not a meditation, not a spiritual practice, and not a deliberate choice to be present or mindful or connected to the earth. Just the necessity of water, of survival, of the body's needs and the land's demands and the invisible structures that hold a life in place. But something happens anyway. Something she doesn't have words for, doesn't even notice most days. The path becomes a kind of anchor, a fixed point in a life that is otherwise shapeless, defined only by the needs of others, by the cycles of seasons and birth and death and weather. The path gives her a place to be herself, even if that self is just a body moving through space, even if she never thinks about it, even if she would laugh at the idea that walking to the well could mean anything beyond getting water. Her feet know this ground. They know the slight rise just before the well, the way the earth is softer there, and how in heavy rain it becomes slippery and you have to place your feet just so. They know the flat stone where she sometimes rests the bucket on the way back when it's too heavy, when her arms are shaking, when she needs to catch her breath and look at the sky for a moment before continuing. They know the place where wildflowers grow in late spring, purple and yellow, and even though she never stops to pick them, even though there's no time for that kind of frivolity, she sees them. She marks their return each year. She would notice if they didn't come back. The well is stone, old, built by someone's grandfather or great-grandfather, no one remembers anymore. It's been repaired a dozen times. Stones replaced when they crack, the wooden frame rebuilt when it rots, the rope changed every few years. But it's the same well, the same water, the same cold shock of it when she splashes her face on hot days, the same metallic taste, slightly mineral, that she's been drinking her whole life. Her children were raised on this water. Her husband's parents drank from this well. If you go back far enough, everyone in the valley is connected by this water, by the shared resource that makes life possible in this particular place. She lowers the bucket. The rope is rough in her hands, familiar. The texture of it, something she could recognize in the dark. She hears the distant splash, feels the weight change as the bucket fills, begins to pull. Hand over hand. The same motion she's made 10,000 times. 20,000. Who's counting? The numbers don't matter. The repetition does. The way the body learns what to do and does it. The way the mind can wander while the hands work. In the way you can be present and absent at the same time, here and somewhere else, yourself, and also just a body, just a pair of hands, just another set of feet on an old path. She hoists the bucket onto the stone lip of the well, careful not to spill too much. The water is clear, cold, perfect. She drinks from her cupped hands, the water shocking her mouth awake, running down her chin. This is the first drink of the day, the first taste, and it's good. She doesn't think, I'm grateful for this water, because gratitude in her world isn't a feeling you name. It's something you do. You use what you have. You don't waste it. You carry it home, and you portion it carefully. And when the well runs low in summer, you worry. And when the winter rains fill it back up, you stop worrying. And that's the shape of gratitude. Not a thought, a relationship. And she lifts the bucket, settles it against her hip, begins the walk back. The path is waiting. The same path, but travelled in reverse now. The perspective shifted, the light different. Dawn has come while she was at the well. The sun is breaking over the eastern hills, turning the valley gold, making long shadows of the trees and the houses, and her own body moving through the morning. She can see smoke rising from her own chimney now. Her eldest daughter has woken, started the fire, put the kettle on. The day is beginning in the house, even as it's beginning in the fields. The same choreography repeated in 100 homes, 1,000 homes, everywhere people live close to the land, close to the rhythms that governed human life for millennia. This is not freedom. She cannot decide to sleep in, to skip the water, to walk a different path. She cannot choose her work or her schedule or the shape of her days. Her life is determined by necessity, by tradition, by the expectations of her family and her community, and the unforgiving demands of the land. She will walk this path until her body can't walk anymore, and then her daughter will walk it, and then her daughter's daughter, and the path will remain, and she will be forgotten, just one more pair of feet among thousands. Her name eventually lost, her face unknown. Nothing left of her but the water she carried and the bread she baked, and the children she raised who will carry on the same patterns, the same rhythms, the same daily return to the well and back again. This is not romantic, but it is something. It is the thing you're missing when you lie awake at 3 in the morning, restless, untethered, scrolling through images of places that will never know your name. It is the weight of continuity, the comfort of repetition, the deep animal knowledge that you are part of something larger than yourself, older than yourself, that will continue after you're gone. It is the sense that your life, however small, however constrained, however invisible to history, is woven into the fabric of a place. That your feet are making a path that others will walk. That your body is participating in a story that doesn't begin with you and won't end with you. It is belonging, not the belonging of choice, of finding your people, of curating a life that reflects your values and your personality and your unique individual self, but the belonging of inheritance, of being claimed by a place, of having your role and your path and your daily movements determined not by preference, but by the simple fact of having been born here, of being the daughter of a woman who was the daughter of a woman who walked this same ground. She doesn't think about any of this as she walks back toward the house, the bucket heavy at her hip, the water sloshing slightly with each step. She thinks about breakfast, about the work that's waiting, about whether she remembered to close the chicken coop last night, or if a fox might have gotten in. Her mind is full of the small concerns that make up a life, the endless mental list of things to do, things to worry about, things to notice and tend and manage. But her feet know, her body knows, the path knows. And somewhere in that knowledge, in the unconscious communion between body and ground, between the soles of her feet and the earth that has held her family for generations, there is something that your mind recognizes even if it can't name it. something that feels like time itself, like the deep, slow time of geology and seasons, and the patient accumulation of footsteps into meaning. She reaches the house. She sets down the bucket. She goes inside to begin the day's work, and the path remains behind her, empty now, waiting for the next set of feet, the next return, the next woman carrying water in the morning light. The path doesn't care who walks it. It doesn't choose. It just holds the memory of the walking, the way water holds the memory of the riverbed, the way stone holds the memory of the glacier's passage, patient, indifferent, present. And somehow, in that patient presence, in that indifference, there is something that feels like the opposite of loneliness. Something that feels like you are never really alone when you walk a path that has held your people. That you are always in conversation with the dead, always accompanied by the ghosts of previous footsteps, always part of a procession that stretches back into the unremembered past and forward into the unimagined future. This is what your restlessness is trying to tell you. Not that you should become a farmer or move to the countryside or reject modernity and return to some imagined pastoral simplicity. The old life was hard. It was often brutal. It offered little choice and less mercy. Many people fled it for good reasons. Many people suffered under the weight of its certainties, its rigid roles, its suffocating smallness. But it offered something that your world has taken away. Not intentionally, not maliciously, just as a side effect of the freedom you now possess, the mobility, the endless options. It offered the knowledge that you belonged somewhere, that the ground knew you, that your feet were walking where your people's feet had walked, that your hands were doing the work your people's hands had done, that your life, however constrained, was part of a story that made sense, that had continuity, that had weight. You don't have that anymore. You have freedom instead, and freedom is valuable. Freedom is good. But freedom is also light, weightless, the feeling of walking on ground that doesn't remember you. And sometimes, in the quiet moments, in the restless hours before dawn, you wonder if there's a way to have both, to be free and to belong, to choose your path and to walk it long enough that it becomes inheritance, to create continuity in a world of constant change. You wonder if you could become the ancestor someone else longs for, if you could walk the same ground long enough that it starts to remember you, if you could press your feet into the earth with enough patience, enough presence, enough return, that one day someone will stand where you stood and feel the weight of it, the continuity of it, the strange comfort of knowing that they are not the first, that they won't be the last, that the path remembers. The valley is waking now. You can see it if you let yourself imagine it. Not as it is, with its highways and subdivisions and cell towers, but as it was, when the paths were footpaths, when the rhythms were seasonal, when time moved differently because there was no other way for time to move. The sun is clearing the eastern hills, and across the valley, from a dozen small farms, smoke is rising. Morning fires, kettles boiling. Breakfasts being prepared by women who've already been awake for hours, who've already walked to the well, fed the animals, started the day's bread. Men are heading to the fields, carrying tools that their fathers carried, their grandfathers, shaped by use into something that fits the hand perfectly, that knows the work without being told. Children are waking, tumbling out of shared beds, pulling on clothes that used to belong to their older siblings, will one day belong to their younger ones. Nothing is new. Everything has been used, mended, passed down, made to last. Not because of some noble commitment to sustainability, but because there's no other option. You use what you have. You make it last. You waste nothing. The paths between the farms are already showing the day's traffic. A neighbour walking to borrow eggs. A child sent to deliver a message because there are no phones, no texts, no instant communication. Information travels at the speed of feet, and so people walk constantly between houses, between farms, between the scattered points that make up the social web of the valley. The paths are communal. They belong to everyone and no one. They're maintained by use, by the constant pressure of feet keeping the brush from overtaking them, keeping them visible, keeping them alive. No one thinks about preserving these paths. No one worries that they might disappear. They're as permanent as the hills, as inevitable as the seasons. They're part of the landscape, part of the infrastructure of daily life, so familiar that they're invisible. You don't notice the path any more than you notice the air you breathe. You just walk it, but the path notices you, not consciously. The earth has no thoughts, but the ground remembers pressure, remembers weight, remembers the shape of things that pass over it repeatedly. The path is memory made visible. It's the accumulation of 1,000 daily walks, 10,000, 100,000, the patient wearing away of stone and the compression of soil until what remains is a line, a direction, a knowing. Your great-grandfather walks the path to the upper field. The same path his father walked, his grandfather, back and back until the origin is lost in time. The field has always been there. The path has always led to it. He doesn't question this. He doesn't wonder if there's a better route, a more efficient way to divide the land. This is how it's always been. This is how it will always be. The continuity is not comforting in any conscious way. It's just the shape of reality, the fabric of existence, the way things are. He walks with a scythe over his shoulder. The wooden handle is worn smooth by the hands of the men who carried it before him. His father, his grandfather. He knows the story, vague and probably embellished, of his great-grandfather making this scythe, carving the handle from an oak tree that grew at the edge of the property, forging the blade in a neighbouring town, carrying it home on the same path his great-grandson now walks. The story might not be true, or it might be partially true, or it might have happened to someone else, is some other scythe, some other man, and the details have blurred over time until all the men and all the scythes have merged into one continuous narrative of work and land and inheritance. It doesn't matter if the story is accurate. What matters is that the scythe is here, still working, still sharp when he takes the time to sharpen it, still doing the work it was made to do. What matters is that his hands fit the same groove his father's hands made, that the tool has been shaped by use into something perfect for the task, that there's a continuity of gesture, of motion, of the body bending to the work that transcends any individual body. When he reaches the field, he begins to cut. The rhythm is automatic. Swing, step, swing, step. The grass falls in neat rows. The sun climbs higher. The sweat starts to run down his back, into his eyes, salt and sting, and the particular discomfort of hard work in heat. There's no romance in this, no meditation, just the mindless repetition of a task that needs doing, that will need doing again tomorrow, and the next day, and every day until winter comes and the grass stops growing. But his body settles into the rhythm, and his mind wanders, and without meaning to, he falls into a kind of trance. Not peace, exactly. Not contentment. Just the absence of resistance. The acceptance of what is. His life is this. It has always been this. It will always be this. The field, the scythe, the path, the valley. The same work his father did, his grandfather, back and back until the beginning, is indistinguishable from myth. He doesn't think, I am continuing a tradition. He doesn't think, I am connected to my ancestors through this work. He thinks about the weather, about whether the hay will dry in time, about the pain in his lower back that's been getting worse over the years, about his son, who's at home today with a fever, and whether it's serious or just one of the many childhood illnesses that come and go like weather. But his body knows something his mind doesn't name. His body knows that it belongs here, that the field is his not because he owns it legally, though he does, but because his sweat is in this soil, his father's sweat, his grandfather's. That the path remembers his feet. That the work has made him, shaped him. given him a place in the world that is specific and known and unchosen, and somehow, despite everything, right? This is not freedom. He cannot decide to be something else, to do different work, and to walk different paths. He is bound to this place by inheritance, by expectation, by the simple fact that leaving would mean losing everything, would mean becoming no one, would mean stepping off the map of the known world into a void where nothing is certain and nothing is given, and you have to make yourself up from nothing. Some people do leave. The valley empties slowly over the years, over the generations. Young people drift toward the cities, toward the factories, toward the promise of wages and choice and lives that aren't determined by the season and the weather and the unchanging rhythms of agricultural time. They leave and they send letters back, and the letters are full of ambivalence. The cities are hard. The work is hard. The loneliness is hard. But there's money. There's possibility. There's the chance to become something other than what you were born to be. The ones who stay don't judge the ones who leave. Or they do, a little, quietly, in the privacy of their own thoughts. But mostly they just continue. The work doesn't stop because people leave. The animals still need feeding. The fields still need tending. The paths still need walking. And so they walk them, fewer feet now, the same routes, and the paths remain, patient, waiting, holding the memory of everyone who ever passed this way. Your great-grandfather finishes the cutting as the sun begins to descend. The light is golden now, the heat less oppressive, the shadows growing long across the valley. He shoulders the scythe and begins the walk back. The path is there, waiting, and his feet find it without thought, without choice. The way home written into his muscles, into his bones, into the unconscious knowledge that comes from walking the same route so many times that it's no longer a route at all. It's just the shape of the world, the only shape, the right shape. He's tired. His back aches. His hands are blistered despite the calluses. He smells like sweat and grass and earth. He's thinking about dinner, about washing up, about sitting down for the first time since dawn, and feeling his body slowly unknot, slowly release the tension of the day's work. He's thinking about his son, hoping the fever is broken, hoping it's nothing serious. He's thinking about tomorrow, which will be the same as today, which was the same as yesterday, stretching back and forward in an unbroken line of sameness that would feel like a prison if he had anything to compare it to. But he doesn't. This is just life, the only life he knows, the only life he can imagine. And when he walks the path home, when his feet fall into the worn groove that generations of feet have made, when the valley settles into the blue-grey dusk and the first stars appear, and the smoke from his chimney rises straight and still in the cooling air. When all of this happens, as it has happened 1,000 times before, as it will happen 1,000 times again, there's something in the repetition that feels like the opposite of emptiness. There's a fullness to it, a weight. Not the weight of burden, though burden is part of it, but the weight of mattering, of being part of something, of knowing that his life, his work, his daily walk on these inherited paths is woven into a fabric that's larger than him, older than him, that will outlast him. That when he's gone, the path will remain. His son will walk it if he stays, or his daughter's husband, or someone else, someone not yet born, who will inherit these fields, these tools, these routes through the landscape that have been here longer than memory. He doesn't think about legacy. The word would mean nothing to him. He just walks home, tired, hungry, ready for rest. But the path remembers. The earth remembers. And somewhere in that remembering, in that patient accumulation of footsteps into meaning, there's something that your restless modern mind recognizes and longs for, even though it can't name it. The sense that you are not alone, that you are never alone, that the ground beneath your feet has held your people before and will hold them again, that walking is not just movement, but a kind of prayer, a kind of conversation with the dead, a way of saying, I am still here. We are still here. The path continues. But there's something else in the path, something darker, something your nostalgia tries to forget. The path is not neutral. It doesn't care who walks it, true. But it was made by specific feet, specific people, specific choices about who belongs here and who doesn't. The path to the well was walked by women, because that was women's work, because the division of labour was not negotiable, because your great-grandmother's life was determined not by her talents or her desires, but by the fact of her sex, her birth, her place in a social order that had no room for questioning. She walked that path every morning for 60 years, and she never once asked if there was another way. Not because the question didn't occur to her, but because asking it would have been pointless, dangerous, a kind of madness. The path was the path. The work was the work. You did what you were born to do, and if it hurt, if it exhausted you, if some part of you yearned for a different life, well, that yearning had nowhere to go. No outlet, no possibility. So you crushed it down, buried it, learned to stop feeling it, and you walked the path. This is the truth that nostalgia edits out. That the inherited landscape was also an inherited prison. That the continuity which feels so comforting from a distance was, for many people, a suffocating weight. That the paths were worn not just by devotion, but by compulsion, by necessity, by the absence of any alternative. Your great-grandfather owned the land, but he was also owned by it, bound to it. The path to the upper field was his inheritance, yes, but it was also his sentence. He would work this field until his body gave out. He would walk this path until he couldn't walk anymore. And then he would die, probably in the same house where he was born, and he would be buried in the small cemetery up the hill, next to his father, his grandfather, the row of stones marking the family's presence in this place, their continuity, their rootedness. It sounds peaceful, doesn't it? It sounds like belonging. But think about what it means. To know, from the moment you're old enough to understand anything, that your life is already decided, that there is no escaping the path, that you will marry who your parents approve of, work the land your father worked, raise children who will do the same, and the only variation will be in the details, whether the harvest is good, whether the children survive, whether your body holds up long enough to see grandchildren. There is no room in this life for the self as you understand it. No room for discovering who you are, what you want, what brings you joy. Those concepts don't exist here. Or they exist only as whispers, as dangerous thoughts quickly suppressed, as the kind of selfishness that could tear apart the delicate social fabric that keeps everyone alive. The path is beautiful in memory, but it was also a chain. And the people who walked it were not free. They were held by the land, by tradition, by the expectations of family and community, and the unforgiving demands of survival. They belonged to the place, yes, but they also belonged to it in the way that property belongs. That tools belong, they were used, they were worn down, and when they broke, they were replaced. This is not to say they didn't love the land. Many of them did. This is not to say they found no joy in the work, no satisfaction in the rhythms, no comfort in the continuity. Of course they did. Human beings can find meaning anywhere, can adapt to almost anything, can make a life even in the narrowest of circumstances. But it's important to remember that the nostalgia you feel when you think about inherited paths is a nostalgia for something that never fully existed. You're mourning a version of the past that has been edited, smoothed, romanticized. You're imagining the belonging without the bondage, the continuity without the confinement, the ritual without the rigidity. The real path was harder than that, colder, less forgiving. Your great-grandmother walked to the well every morning, yes. But think about what that meant. Think about the winter mornings when the cold was so brutal it hurt to breathe, when her hands froze to the bucket, when the path was ice and every step was a risk. Think about the summer mornings when she was already exhausted from the previous day's work, when her body ached, when she was pregnant again, always pregnant. The endless cycle of bearing and nursing and losing children to the diseases that swept through the valley like weather. Think about the morning she walked that path knowing her youngest son was dying, that there was nothing she could do, that the doctor was 2 days away and wouldn't come for a family who couldn't pay. Think about the morning she walked it after her husband hit her, after she lay awake all night wondering if this was just how it was, if this was just what marriage meant, if there was any way out, or if the path was all there was. The path holds these memories too, not just the peaceful ones, not just the golden hour walks in late summer when the valley is beautiful and the work is light and everything feels like it might be okay, but the hard memories, the desperate ones, the moments when the path felt like the only thing holding her upright, when the routine was the only thing keeping her from falling apart, when the simple fact of putting one foot in front of the other was the only way to survive another day. This is also belonging. This is also continuity. The dark side of it, the side your nostalgia doesn't want to see. Because if you truly belonged to a place, if you were truly rooted, and then you couldn't leave when it hurt, you couldn't escape when it became unbearable. You were held by the land, and the land didn't care about your suffering. It just needed the work done. It needed the path walked, the water carried, the fields tended, the cycle continued. And so you walked. Because what else could you do? Your great-grandfather in the field, swinging the scythe until his hands bled, until his back screamed, until he could barely stand. He wasn't doing it because he loved the work. He was doing it because if he didn't, his family would starve. The path to the field was not a meditation. It was a mandate. Walk or die. Work or lose everything. Belong or be cast out into a world that had no place for you. This is the truth that sits beneath the nostalgia. That the old world gave people a place, yes. But it gave them no choice about that place. It gave them no way to leave, no way to become something different, no way to say, this isn't working for me without being told, it doesn't matter if it's working for you. This is what you were born to do. And many people suffered under that certainty. Many people were crushed by it. The ones who didn't fit. The ones who wanted something else. The ones whose bodies couldn't handle the work. Whose minds couldn't handle the sameness. Whose spirits couldn't handle the confinement. They walked the paths too, but they walked them like prisoners, like people in chains. And when they looked at the valley, they didn't see home. They saw a cage. Beautiful maybe. Familiar certainly, but still a cage. So when you feel the longing for inherited landscapes and for paths worn by the same feet for generations, for the continuity of place across time, when you feel that ache in your chest, that restlessness that won't be satisfied, remember this. You're not longing for the past as it actually was. You're longing for an edited version, a fantasy, a story where belonging doesn't also mean bondage, where continuity doesn't also mean confinement, where the path is a choice and not a sentence. The real past was more complicated than that, more painful, more beautiful, and more brutal, often in the same moment, often in the same breath. Your great-grandmother at the well, drinking from her cupped hands, the water cold and perfect. In that moment, she might have felt something like peace, something like gratitude, something like belonging. But in the next moment, she had to lift the bucket and walk back. And her back hurt, and she was tired, and there were 1,000 tasks waiting for her, and she knew that tomorrow would be the same, and the next day, and the day after that, forever. That's the whole truth. Both parts. The peace and the pain. The belonging and the bondage. And the question you have to ask yourself as you lie awake in your modern life with all your freedom and all your restlessness is this. Which would you actually choose if you could? Would you trade your freedom for belonging? Would you give up your choices for continuity? Would you walk the same path every day for the rest of your life if it meant you never had to wonder where you belonged? Maybe you would. Maybe some part of you would make that trade in a heartbeat, would give up everything for the simple comfort of knowing your place, of being held by the land, of walking where your people walked. Or maybe you wouldn't. Maybe the freedom is worth it, even if it's lonely. Maybe the restlessness is the price you pay for autonomy, for the ability to leave when something doesn't work, to try again, to become someone different. There's no right answer. Only the tension, only the ache, only the recognition that you are standing in the gap between two worlds, two ways of being, and neither one is complete. Neither one is home. The past had belonging, but no freedom. The present has freedom, but no belonging. And you, suspended between them, feeling the pull of both, the limitations of both, are trying to figure out if there's a third way. A path that hasn't been walked yet. A way to be rooted and free at the same time. Maybe there is, maybe there isn't, but either way, the longing remains. And the sense that something has been lost, that the path remembers, even if you don't, that your feet are looking for ground that knows them, that will hold them, that will remember they were here. And that longing is not a mistake. It's not nostalgia for a past that was better, because the past wasn't better. It was just different. It offered something you don't have at the cost of something you do. The longing is your body trying to tell you what it needs, what it has always needed, what it will always need, no matter how the world changes, no matter how free you become, no matter how far you travel. It needs to belong. It needs to be held. It needs to walk the same ground long enough that the ground starts to walk it back. That need doesn't make you weak. It doesn't make you ungrateful for your freedom. It just makes you human. We're an animal built for place, for continuity, for the slow accumulation of footsteps into meaning. And maybe, just maybe, you can find a way to honor that need without giving up everything else, without returning to a past that wasn't as perfect as you imagine, without walking into a cage and calling it home. Maybe you can create new paths. Walk them long enough that they become inheritance. Stay in one place long enough that it starts to remember you. Build a life that has continuity, even if it also has choice, that has belonging, even if it also has freedom. Maybe you can become the ancestor someone else will long for, the one who started the path that others will walk, the one who pressed their feet into the earth with enough love, enough patience, enough presence that the ground started to hold them back. It won't be easy. It won't be automatic. It won't come from tradition or inheritance or the weight of centuries. It will have to be a choice, made daily, made consciously, made against the current of a culture that says you should always be moving, always be optimizing, always be somewhere else. But maybe that's the third way, the path between bondage and weightlessness, between the prison of the past and the loneliness of the present. Maybe you can walk it, maybe you already are. The seasons turned. They always did. Winter came to the valley like a closing door, sealing everything in, making the paths harder, the work slower, the world smaller. Your great-grandmother still walked to the well, but now she had to break ice, had to carry the water carefully so it wouldn't freeze before she got home, had to move faster because the cold was dangerous, because frostbite was real, because winter in that time and place was something you survived, not something you enjoyed. The path in winter was a different thing. The same route, the same stones, the same trees marking the way. But everything changed by snow, by ice, by the way cold makes the world harder, sharper, less forgiving. She walked it anyway. She had to. The water didn't stop being necessary just because the weather turned. The animals didn't stop needing care. The work didn't pause for comfort. But something happened in winter that didn't happen in the easier seasons. The path became more conscious, more deliberate. Each step had to be placed carefully. Each movement had to be considered. The automatic rhythm that carried her through summer. The unconscious ease of familiar ground was replaced by attention, by presence, by the sharp awareness that comes when everything is harder and the cost of mistakes is higher. And in that attention, something else emerged, a different kind of relationship with the path. Not the mindless belonging of summer when the walking was so easy she barely noticed it, but a harder belonging, a chosen belonging. The act of walking even when it hurts, even when it's difficult, even when every part of you wants to stay inside where it's warm. This is another truth about inherited landscapes. They don't just hold you in the good times. They hold you through everything. Through winter and summer, through abundance and scarcity, through the years when the harvest is good and the years when it fails. The path doesn't disappear when things get hard. It's still there, still waiting, still demanding to be walked. And the people who walked it, who returned to it season after season, year after year, who kept walking even when the walking was painful, they were building something that's hard to name, not happiness, not ease, but something like fidelity, something like commitment. The knowledge that you show up even when you don't want to, that you do the work even when it's hard, that the path is not a relationship you abandon when it stops serving you. This is foreign to you, isn't it? In your world, everything is conditional. You stay in a place as long as it works for you. You keep a job as long as it's fulfilling. You maintain relationships as long as they're healthy. And when something stops working, you're encouraged to leave, to find something better, to optimize, to never settle. There's wisdom in that, real wisdom. The people in the old world stayed in situations that harmed them, that diminished them, that slowly killed them, because leaving wasn't an option, because the path was the only path. And that was tragic. That was wrong. That deserved to be changed. But something was lost too. The knowledge that commitment means staying even when it's hard. That belonging means being held through the difficult seasons, not just the easy ones. That depth comes from persistence, from the slow accumulation of years in the same place with the same people, walking the same paths through every kind of weather. Your great-grandmother didn't choose the path, but she walked it through everything, through grief and joy, through sickness and health, through winters that nearly broke her, and summers that gave her just enough hope to continue. And by walking it, by returning to it, by letting it hold her through all of it, she built a relationship with the ground that went deeper than choice, deeper than preference, deeper than the question of whether it was serving her needs in any given moment. She belonged to the path, and the path belonged to her. Not because either of them chose it, but because the relationship had been walked into existence, step by step, season after season, until it became something undeniable, something real, something that would outlast her body, her memory, her name. You don't have that. You have something else instead, the freedom to leave, the ability to choose, the option to say, this isn't working, and find something that does. And that's good. That's important. That's necessary for all the people who were trapped by the old certainties, who suffered under them, you who needed the freedom to become something other than what they were born to be. But it comes at a cost. The cost is depth. The cost is the kind of belonging that can only be built through persistence, through staying, through walking the same path long enough that it becomes part of you, and you become part of it. Because here's the thing about depth. You can't get it quickly. You can't optimize your way to it. You can't find the perfect place, the perfect path, the perfect life where everything works and nothing hurts, and you never have to question whether you should stay. Depth comes from time, from repetition, from the patient, unglamorous work of showing up again and again, even when it's boring, even when it's hard, even when some part of you wants to be somewhere else. The path your great-grandmother walked wasn't special. It wasn't beautiful in any objective sense. It was just a worn line of earth between her house and the well, muddy in spring, dusty in summer, frozen in winter. Nothing remarkable, nothing worth photographing or writing about or remembering. But it became special through the walking, through the accumulation of footsteps, through the simple fact that she kept returning to it, kept walking it, kept letting it hold her, until the path and her life became inseparable. Until you couldn't tell the story of one without telling the story of the other. That's what you're missing. Not the path itself, but the relationship, the depth, the sense that your life is woven into a place so thoroughly that you can't imagine one without the other. You could build that, even now, even with all your freedom, even in a world that tells you to keep moving, so keep optimizing, keep searching for something better. You could choose a place, a path, a route through the landscape of your life, and you could walk it. Not because it's perfect, not because it's easy, not because it's serving all your needs in every moment, but because the walking itself is the point. Because depth comes from persistence. Because belonging is built by returning. You could walk the same route every morning. Not the optimal route, not the route the algorithm suggests. Just a route. Your route. The one you choose, and then keep choosing, day after day, season after season, until your feet know it without thought, until the ground starts to feel familiar, until the trees and the stones and the particular quality of light in that particular place become part of the texture of your life. You could do that. You have that freedom. But will you? Or will you keep searching for the perfect path, the one that feels right immediately, the one that promises belonging without requiring commitment? This is the question your restlessness is asking. This is the choice you're avoiding when you scroll through images of other places, other lives, other paths that might finally be the right ones. The old world didn't give people a choice. The path was given, inherited, inescapable. And that was both the gift and the curse of it. They belonged because they had to. They had depth because they couldn't leave. You have the opposite problem. You can leave any time. So you do. Or you think about it. Or you keep the option open just in case. And that openness prevents you from ever fully arriving, ever fully committing, ever fully belonging. Because belonging requires closing other doors. It requires saying, this is my place, not because it's perfect, but because I'm choosing it. This is my path, not because it's the best path, but because it's mine. I'm going to walk it long enough that it becomes part of me, long enough that the ground remembers, long enough that when I'm gone, someone else might stand here and feel the weight of it, the continuity of it, the strange comfort of knowing that they're not the first to walk this way. That's the choice, not between the past and the present, not between freedom and belonging, but between depth and optionality, between the richness that comes from commitment and the emptiness that comes from always keeping your options open. Winter in the valley, your great-grandmother at the well, her hands red with cold, and her breath forming clouds in the frigid air. She doesn't want to be here. She wants to be inside, warm, resting. But she's here anyway, because this is her path, because this is her work, because the path doesn't care about her preferences, and she's learned not to ask if there's another way. There's a kind of peace in that, not the peace of happiness, but the peace of acceptance, the peace of knowing that some things are just what they are, and you can resist them or you can walk them. And walking is easier, quieter, less exhausting than the constant questioning of whether you should be somewhere else. You could learn that peace, not by giving up your freedom, but by using your freedom to choose commitment. By walking the same path long enough that the question of whether you should be walking it fades away, replaced by the simple fact that you are walking it, that you have walked it, that you will walk it tomorrow and the next day and the day after that, until the path becomes inheritance, until your feet become the feet that others will wonder about, until your life becomes the life that someone else, someday, will look back on with longing and ask, what was it like to belong like that? To know your place like that? To walk the same ground long enough that it became home? Spring came slowly to the valley. It always did. Not a sudden shift, but a gradual thawing, a patient return of colour and warmth, and the possibility of easier days. The path emerged from under the snow, muddy and soft, almost unrecognisable after months of ice and hardness. Your great-grandmother walked it and felt her feet sink slightly, felt the give of the earth. I felt the difference. This was the beginning of the year, really. Not January, not the arbitrary turning of the calendar, but this moment when the ground softened and the work could begin again in earnest. The cycle starting over. The same work, the same rhythms, but everything feeling new because of the contrast with winter. Because survival itself feels like victory when you've made it through another cold season. She walked to the well and noticed things. The first green shoots pushing up through the mud. The birds returning. Their songs unfamiliar after months of silence. The way the air smelled different, like earth and water. And the slow, invisible work of things growing. She noticed these things not because she was trying to be present or mindful or grateful. She noticed them because they mattered. Because they were signs, signals, information about whether this year would be good or hard, whether the rains would come, whether the crops would grow, whether there would be enough. Her attention wasn't romantic, it was practical. But there's something in that practicality that your modern mind has lost. The ability to read the landscape, to know what the early birds mean, what the smell of the air means, what the particular quality of the morning light suggests about the day to come. She knew these things because her life depended on knowing them. And that dependence created a relationship with the place that went deeper than appreciation. It was intimacy born of necessity. Knowledge earned through years of attention. You don't have that relationship with your landscape. You can't read it. You don't need to. The weather comes from an app. And the seasons are something that happen in the background while you maintain the same climate-controlled temperature year-round. Spring doesn't mean the beginning of the work year. It's just a time when everything gets a little more colourful, when people post pictures of flowers, when you might think vaguely about going outside more, but probably won't. The landscape is scenery for you. Beautiful maybe, interesting possibly, but fundamentally separate from your life, from your survival, from the actual texture of your days. You could live anywhere and your life would be roughly the same. The same work, the same routines, the same screens, the same disconnection from the ground beneath your feet. This is another loss. Not the big romantic loss of inherited paths and ancestral continuity, but the smaller, quieter loss of literacy. On the ability to read the world around you, to know what the earth is telling you, to have a relationship with place that's based on attention, on observation, on the slow accumulation of knowledge that comes from being somewhere long enough to see the patterns. Your great-grandmother knew the valley the way you know your phone. Intimately, unconsciously. Every app, every feature, every swipe and tap and notification setting. You know your phone because you use it constantly. She knew the valley because she walked it constantly. Because she watched it. Because her survival required her to pay attention. And that attention created a kind of love. Not the love of choice, of finding something beautiful and deciding to cherish it, but the love of familiarity, of deep knowledge, of relationship earned through time. She loved the valley the way you can only love something you've lived with through everything. Through its beauty and its harshness. Through the springs when it bloomed and the winters when it nearly killed you. That love is also missing from your restlessness. You don't love any place that deeply because you haven't given yourself the chance. You've moved too often. You've kept your options open. You've stayed light, portable, ready to leave if something better comes along. And in staying light, you've stayed shallow. You've lived on the surface of places without ever going deep enough to know them the way she knew the valley. Deep knowledge takes time. It takes persistence. It takes the kind of commitment that feels dangerous in a world that values flexibility. Because if you truly commit to knowing a place, you're making a bet. You're betting that this place is worth knowing. that the years you spend here won't be wasted, that the depth you build will be worth more than the breadth you're giving up. And maybe it will be. Maybe it won't. There's no guarantee. But the thing is, you'll never know until you try, until you stop moving long enough to actually see where you are, until you walk the same paths enough times to notice the differences, the changes, the subtle shifts that only become visible through repetition. Spring in the valley, the path changing every day imperceptibly, the mud drying, the green spreading, the world waking up. Your great-grandmother walked it and knew what each change meant, knew what was early and what was late, knew what was normal and what was worrying, knew the language of the landscape because she'd been reading it her whole life. You could learn that language, even now, even in your modern landscape of concrete and asphalt and carefully cultivated parks. You could walk the same route long enough to notice things, to see the tree that blooms first every spring, to recognize the particular slant of afternoon light in summer, to know which corner gets icy first in winter, to build a relationship with your place that's based on attention, on presence, on the simple act of noticing what's there. It won't save you. It won't solve your restlessness. It won't give you the kind of belonging your ancestors had, the kind that was inherited, unchosen, inescapable. But it's something. It's a way of being in relationship with the ground beneath your feet. A way of saying, I am here. I am paying attention. I am learning the language of this place, one season at a time. One walk at a time, one small observation at a time. And maybe, over years, that attention accumulates into something like knowledge, something like literacy, something like the beginning of belonging. Not the belonging of inheritance, but the belonging of choice, of commitment, of showing up again and again until the place starts to feel familiar, until you start to notice the patterns, until the landscape stops being scenery and starts being something you're in relationship with. It's not the same as what your great-grandmother had, but it's not nothing either. Summer, the longest days, the hardest work, the fields full of life and labor, everyone moving with purpose, with urgency, with the knowledge that the season is short and the work is endless, and you have to make the most of it while you can. Your great-grandfather in the fields from dawn until dark, coming home with dirt under his fingernails, in the creases of his hands, ground so deep into his skin that no amount of washing would get it all out. He wore the earth on his body, carried it with him, smelled like it. And in that constant contact, in that daily intimacy with the soil, something happened that's hard to articulate but impossible to miss. He belonged to the earth, not in a poetic sense, in a literal sense. His body was made of the food grown in this soil. His children were made of it. His sweat went back into it. The cycle was closed, complete, visible. He could see how his labor transformed the earth, and how the earth transformed his labor back into life, into food, into the continuation of everything. You don't have that cycle. Your food comes from somewhere else, grown by someone else, in soil you'll never see. Your labor produces, what? Data, emails, services, things that evaporate, that leave no trace, that can't be touched or held or planted for next year. Your work doesn't transform the earth. It doesn't even touch the earth. It exists in an abstract space of screens and networks and invisible transactions. And your body knows this. Your body knows that you're not participating in the fundamental cycle, the basic conversation between human effort and earthly response. You're doing something else entirely, something that might be valuable, that might be important, but that doesn't create the closed loop, the visible transformation, the sense that your work matters in some immediate, physical, undeniable way. This is another source of your restlessness. The absence of that loop, the sense that your effort goes out into the void and nothing comes back, nothing grows, nothing changes in any way you can see or touch or taste. Your great-grandfather could see the results of his work every day. The field that was empty is now planted. The plants that were small are now tall. The green that was faint is now thick and healthy, or thin and struggling, telling him something about the soil, the rain, the choices he made. The feedback was immediate, visible, real. And at harvest, the transformation was complete. The seed he planted became food. The food became life. The life became strength. The strength became more work, more planting, more harvest. The cycle continued, and he was part of it, necessary to it, held within it. That kind of participation creates a particular kind of meaning. Not the meaning that comes from achieving your goals, or finding your passion, or making a difference in some abstract way, but the meaning that comes from being part of something larger than yourself, older than yourself, that functions according to laws you didn't invent and can't change. You're just participating, doing your part, keeping the cycle going. There's a humility in that, a quietness. You're not special. You're not unique. You're just one more pair of hands in an endless line of hands doing the work that keeps everyone alive. And somehow, that lack of specialness is comforting. It means you don't have to figure out what your unique purpose is. You don't have to optimize yourself or find your passion or make your mark. You just have to do the work. Plant the seed, tend the field, harvest the crop, feed your family. And the meaning is built into the cycle itself. You don't have that. You have to create your own meaning. You have to figure out what matters, what's worth doing, what gives your life purpose. And that's exhausting. That's the source of so much of your modern anxiety. The pressure to make your life meaningful, to find work that fulfills you, to create a narrative that makes sense, that justifies your existence. Your ancestors didn't have that pressure. The meaning was given. You worked the land, you raised your children, you participated in the cycle. That was enough. That was everything. But it wasn't freedom. It wasn't choice. It wasn't the ability to become something other than what you were born to be. So again, the trade. Again, the tension. They had meaning without freedom. You have freedom without meaning. And both states are incomplete. Both states leave you longing for what's missing. Summer in the valley, the height of the growing season. Everything abundant, everything possible, everything demanding attention and work and presence. Your great-grandfather in the field, his hands in the earth, his body aching, his mind occupied with the 1,000 small decisions that make up a day of agricultural work. Where to plant, when to water, which plants to thin, which weeds to pull. He wasn't thinking about meaning. He wasn't wondering if his work mattered. He was just doing it because it needed to be done, because his family needed to eat, because the cycle demanded his participation and didn't care about his feelings on the matter. But there was satisfaction in it, real satisfaction. The kind that comes from seeing the direct results of your effort, from working with your hands, your body, your strength, from being tired in a way that feels earned, that feels like the natural consequence of useful work rather than the artificial exhaustion of sitting in a chair all day, doing things that don't feel real. You miss that, don't you? The physical satisfaction of work. The body tired in a good way. The mind quiet because the work required attention, but not anxiety. The simple equation of effort producing results. Visible results. Results you could touch and carry home and transform into the next thing. You can't go back to agricultural work. Most of you wouldn't want to, even if you could. It's too hard, too uncertain, too dependent on factors you can't control, too limiting. But you can recognize what you've lost in the trade. You can acknowledge that the abstract work of modernity, for all its benefits, for all its complexity and creativity and potential, doesn't satisfy the body's need to participate in the fundamental cycle, to transform the earth, to see the results, to close the loop. And maybe you can find small ways to recover that satisfaction, not by becoming a farmer, but by finding work that has some physicality to it, some tangible result. some way of seeing what you've done. Even if it's just a garden, just a small plot where you put seeds in the ground and watch them grow and harvest them and eat them and feel, for a moment, like you're participating in something real, something old, something that connects you to every human who ever lived close enough to the earth to know how it works. It won't replace the meaning your ancestors had, but it might quiet the restlessness, just a little, might give your body something it's been missing, might create a small loop, a small cycle, a small way of feeling like your effort matters in some immediate, physical, undeniable way. Fall, the harvest, the culmination of the year's work, everything you've been building toward, everything you've been hoping for, now visible, measurable, real. The fields giving up their bounty or their disappointment. The year revealing itself as good or hard, abundant or scarce. Your ancestors lived in this uncertainty. They worked all year without knowing if it would be enough. They planted and tended and hoped, but they couldn't control the weather, couldn't guarantee the outcome, couldn't optimize their way to success. They could only do the work and wait and see what the earth gave back. This is another thing you've lost. The acceptance of uncertainty, the ability to live with not knowing, to work without guarantee, to invest your effort without any promise of return. You live in a world that tries to eliminate uncertainty, that offers insurance and guarantees and predictable outcomes. That tells you, if you just work hard enough, plan well enough, optimize carefully enough, you can control the results. You can make sure everything turns out okay. But you can't. Not really. The illusion of control is just that. An illusion. Things still go wrong. Plans still fail. Hard work doesn't always pay off. And when that happens, when the uncertainty breaks through the illusion, you're devastated. Because you weren't prepared for it. Because you thought you could control it. Because the culture promised you that you could. Your ancestors knew better. They knew the harvest might fail. They knew the weather might turn. They knew that no amount of work could guarantee success. So they worked anyway. They did what needed to be done, and then they waited, and then they accepted what came. Good or bad. Abundant or scarce. They accepted it because what else could they do? That acceptance isn't resignation. It isn't passivity. It's wisdom. The wisdom of knowing what you can control and what you can't. The wisdom of doing your part and then letting go of the outcome. The wisdom of living with uncertainty instead of fighting it. You could learn that wisdom. You could stop trying to control everything. Stop believing that if you just work hard enough, plan well enough, and you can guarantee the outcome. Stop being devastated when things don't go according to plan. You could do your work, walk your path, plant your seeds, literal or metaphorical, and then let go. Let the harvest come as it comes. Let life unfold as it unfolds. Trust that you've done what you can, and the rest is not yours to control. This is harder than it sounds. Your whole culture is built on the opposite assumption, that you should control everything, that you can control everything, that if something goes wrong, it's because you didn't try hard enough, didn't plan well enough, didn't optimize carefully enough. But the truth is closer to what your ancestors knew. Some things are beyond your control. The weather, the economy, other people's choices, the random accidents that change everything. You can work hard and still fail. And you can do everything right and still lose. And learning to live with that, learning to accept uncertainty, to work without guarantee, to plant without knowing if there will be a harvest, that's a kind of freedom too. Not the freedom of control, but the freedom of letting go. Of doing your part and trusting that's enough. Of walking the path without knowing where it leads. Fall in the valley. The harvest coming in. Your great-grandfather surveying the fields, seeing what the year has brought. Some years are good. Some years are hard. Some years are somewhere in between. He accepts what comes. Not because he's passive, but because he knows that acceptance is the only option, that fighting against what is doesn't change what is, that you take what the earth gives you and you work with it and you survive and you plant again next year. That's resilience, not the modern kind, where you bounce back quickly and stay positive and turn every failure into a learning opportunity. But the older kind, the kind that says, "This is hard, and I'm going to keep going anyway. This didn't work out, and I'm going to try again. The harvest failed, and we're going to make it through the winter somehow. And in the spring, we'll plant again." Stubborn resilience, patient resilience, the kind that doesn't require optimism or positivity or any belief that things will get better. Just the determination to keep going, to stay on the path, to do the work, to plant again. You could learn that too. You could stop requiring everything to work out. Stop needing to know the outcome before you begin. Stop waiting for certainty before you commit. You could plant anyway, walk anyway, stay anyway. I do the work without knowing if it will pay off. Accept that some harvests will be good and some will fail. And you'll keep planting either way because that's what planting is. That's what commitment is. That's what it means to be in relationship with anything, land, place, people, over time. Winter again, the cycle complete. The valley settling into cold and stillness. The work slowing but never stopping. Always something that needs doing. Always the path that needs walking. Your great-grandmother, older now, her body worn by the years, the decades of work, the endless repetition of the same tasks. Her hands are gnarled. Her back is bent. She moves more slowly than she used to. The path to the well is harder now. Every step costs something, but she still walks it. Because what else would she do? This is her life. This is what her life has been. This is what it will be until she can't walk anymore. There's no dramatic revelation at the end, no moment where she looks back and understands what it all meant. She just keeps walking, keeps working, keeps participating in the cycle until the cycle goes on without her. And when she dies, quietly, in the house where she was born, surrounded by family or alone, the details lost to time, the path remains, the well remains, the work remains. Someone else walks to the well. Someone else carries the water. The cycle continues. She's forgotten quickly. Not cruelly, just inevitably. The living have their own work to do, their own lives to live. She becomes a name, then a vague memory, then nothing. Just one more woman who walked the path, carried the water, did the work. One among thousands, tens of thousands, stretching back into the unremembered past. This is the fate you fear, isn't it? To be forgotten, to have your life not matter, to do the same work day after day and then disappear as if you were never here. But here's the thing, she wasn't forgotten completely. She's remembered now, by you, thinking about her in the quiet hours when you can't sleep, wondering what her life was like, longing for the kind of belonging she had, even though you know it came at a cost you wouldn't want to pay. She's remembered in the path itself, if any part of it remains. In the way the ground holds the memory of all those feet, all those walks, all those women carrying water through the centuries. The earth doesn't forget. It just absorbs the memory into itself, holds it silently, offers it up to anyone willing to pay attention. She's remembered in you, or in the fact that you're here at all, that her children survived, that they had children, that the line continued until it reached you. You're the harvest of her work. You're the result of all those walks to the well, all those mornings rising before dawn, all those years of labor and love and stubborn persistence. You carry her in your body, in your bones, in the particular way you tilt your head or move your hands or stand in the morning light. Gestures she made, passed down through the generations, arriving in you without your knowledge, without your choice. You're her continuation, her echo. And maybe that's enough. Maybe that's the real meaning of the inherited path. Not that she walked it so someone would remember her specifically, but that she walked it so the path would continue, so the work would get done, so the next generation would survive to walk their own paths, make their own choices, live their own lives. She gave you the freedom she didn't have. She did the work so you wouldn't have to. She stayed so you could leave. She walked the same path every day so you could walk 1,000 different paths, so you could have options, so you could become something she couldn't even imagine. That was the gift, not the path itself, but the fact that you don't have to walk it, that you have choices she never had, that you can create your own meaning instead of inheriting it, that you're free. And your restlessness, your longing for inherited landscapes, your sense that something has been lost, maybe that's not ingratitude. Maybe it's grief. Grief for what was given up so you could have what you have. So grief for the belonging that was sacrificed so you could have freedom. Grief for the paths that are gone, the continuity that's broken, the connections that can't be recovered. That grief is real. Honor it. Feel it. Let it teach you what matters. But don't let it trap you in nostalgia for a past that wasn't as perfect as you imagine. Don't let it make you believe that going back is possible or even desirable. The old world is gone. The old paths are gone. Your great-grandmother is gone, and her life, for all its belonging, for all its continuity, was also hard and constrained and limited in ways you wouldn't choose. You have something different, something better in some ways, worse in others. You have freedom. You have choice. You have the ability to create your own path instead of inheriting one. And that's not nothing. And that's everything your ancestors might have wanted for you, if they could have imagined it. So maybe the question isn't how to get back what they had. Maybe the question is how to use what you have, the freedom, the choice, the ability to move and change and become, to create something new, something that has both freedom and belonging, both choice and commitment, both movement and depth. Maybe you can create the paths that your descendants will long for. Maybe you can walk the same ground long enough that it becomes inheritance. Maybe you can choose a place and commit to it and stay with it through the seasons, through the hard times and the good times, until the relationship deepens into something that feels like what your ancestors had. Not the same, but related. A different kind of belonging, built on choice instead of necessity, on commitment instead of constraint. It's possible. It's been done. People are doing it now, all around you, choosing places and staying, building communities and tending them, walking the same paths until the paths start to walk them back. It's slower than you want it to be. It's harder than it should be. It requires fighting against everything your culture tells you about staying light, staying mobile, keeping your options open. But it's possible, and maybe that's the inheritance your great-grandmother actually left you. Not a specific path to walk, but the knowledge that paths matter. That belonging is built through repetition, through return, through the patient accumulation of footsteps into meaning. She showed you what it looks like. Now you get to decide if you'll do it your own way, with your own path, your own choice, your own daily return to the ground you've decided to call home. You're lying in bed now. The restlessness is still there, but it's quieter, softer, less like anxiety and more like a question, less like a problem to solve and more like something to sit with, to understand, to let teach you what it needs to teach you. The longing for inherited landscapes isn't about going back. It's about going deeper. It's your body telling you that you are made for more than passing through, that you need to belong somewhere, to something, in a way that's rooted and real and built over time. You can't inherit that belonging anymore. The paths are gone. The continuity is broken. The old certainties are lost. But you can build it. You can choose it. You can create it through your own daily returns, your own patient presence, your own commitment to staying long enough to actually know a place. It won't be easy. It won't be automatic. It won't come with the weight of tradition or the certainty of necessity. But it will be yours, built by your feet, shaped by your choices, made real by your return. And maybe that's enough. Maybe that's the new way, the third way, the path between bondage and weightlessness. Maybe you can be both free and rooted, both mobile and committed, both yourself and part of something larger. Maybe you can walk a path that's yours and also shared, chosen and also inherited by the ones who come after you. Maybe you can become the ancestor someone else will long for, the one who stayed, the one who paid attention, the one whose feet pressed into the earth with enough love, enough patience, enough presence, that the ground started to hold them back. The valley is quiet now in your imagination. The sun is setting. The smoke rises straight from the chimneys. The paths are empty, waiting for tomorrow's feet, tomorrow's walks, tomorrow's continuation of the ancient cycle. You don't live in that valley. You live here now, in a different world with different challenges and different freedoms. But the need is the same. The longing is the same. The body's hunger for belonging, for continuity, for the sense that you are part of something older and larger than yourself. That need doesn't make you weak. It makes you human. And honoring that need, finding ways to satisfy it in a world that makes it difficult, finding ways to belong even when belonging isn't given, finding ways to create continuity even when the culture tells you to keep moving. That's not nostalgia. That's wisdom. That's you listening to the oldest part of yourself, the part that remembers when time moved differently, when paths were walked for generations, when the ground knew your name because it knew your people's names. You can't go back to that world, but you can carry its wisdom forward. You can walk with intention, stay with commitment, return with presence. You can create the paths your children or your neighbors or strangers who come after you will one day walk and wonder about and feel comforted by. You can be the continuity you're longing for. You can become the inheritance. The path is waiting. It's always waiting. The ground is patient. It doesn't care if you're the first or the thousandth to walk it. It just holds you, remembers you, offers itself up for your feet, your return, your participation in the slow work of making a place into home. You just have to choose it, and then keep choosing it, day after day, season after season, until the choosing becomes unconscious, until your feet know the way, until the path and your life are woven together so thoroughly that you can't imagine one without the other, until you belong, not because you had to, but because you chose to, because you stayed, because you walked the same ground long enough that it became yours, and you became its, and the boundary between the two dissolved into something that feels like time itself, like continuity, like home. The restlessness is fading now. Your breathing is slower. Your body is heavy in the bed. The thoughts are drifting, losing their edges, becoming softer. The valley is there in your mind, settling into dusk, into the blue hour, into the quiet that comes when the work is done and the night is beginning and everything is suspended in the space between day and tomorrow. Your great-grandmother is walking home from the well, one last time, her shadow long on the path, the water heavy at her hip. She's tired. She's always tired. But she's almost home, almost done with the day's work, almost able to rest. She doesn't think about meaning. She doesn't wonder if her life mattered. She just walks, one foot in front of the other, the same steps she's been taking for 60 years, the same path, the same earth. And the path holds her, the way it always has, the way it always will, patient, indifferent, present, remembering everything and nothing. Just ground, waiting for feet. Just time, while waiting for footsteps to give it shape. Just the ancient conversation between body and earth, between the living and the land, between the self and the place that holds it. You can rest now. You can let the longing be what it is. You can stop fighting the restlessness. You can just notice it, acknowledge it, understand what it's telling you. You were made for belonging. You need it. Your body needs it. Your feet need it. And you can have it. Not the same way your ancestors had it, but in your own way, your own time, your own chosen path. Tomorrow, you can begin. Or not. The path is patient. It will wait. But if you choose to walk it, to return to it, to commit to it, to let it become the route your feet know by heart, then you'll be building something. Something that lasts. Something that matters. In something that connects you to everyone who ever walked the same ground long enough to call it home. And maybe one day, someone else will stand where you stood. Will walk where you walked. Will feel the weight of your footsteps beneath theirs and wonder, what was it like? To belong like that? To stay like that? To walk the same path until it became inheritance? And they'll feel what you're feeling now. The longing, the restlessness, the strange comfort of knowing they're not the first. They won't be the last. The path continues. Always. The embers are fading now. The fire is almost out. Just the faint glow of coals, the last warmth of the day, the gentle descent into darkness and rest. You can sleep now. The path will be there in the morning, waiting, remembering, home.